We will start today. I just want to share some objectives. So this is what I'd like you to leave with. So understanding the core features of MTSS. How many of you are familiar with MTSS? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, great. A lot of you look very familiar to me. I know I've probably done some trainings with you all before, so it's nice to see familiar faces. Understanding the role, your role in MTSS, what the role of the social worker is. Being able to categorize services into tiers. So this is important, A, for service delivery, but also for recording, because I know that you do a lot of recording and reporting of your work, and so we're going to help you kind of understand how that fits into an MTSS framework. Develop skills in using data. This will be a lot of fun. To determine the need for more intensive services. So when you're referred a student, what do you do within an MTSS framework? How can you use that MTSS lens to identify what the student needs more support in? And then apply the knowledge at your individual site. So we're going to try to make sure that you really have a good understanding of how you can take the information that you learned here today and bring it back to your school site. So let's start with a little video.
Okay, so how are you going to get from there to there?
I think it's south and west.
Okay, try it. Like, take your finger and now follow my finger with me. West. Did we get to our destination?
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
It's a real challenge to educators today to figure out how do you use your available resources so that every child succeeds. Before we started our work, we had what other schools had. There would be a teacher in a classroom, they would teach a curriculum, and if a student needed extra help, out the door they went, down the hallway they went, and somebody else pulled out all the tricks that they knew and tried to teach that child. So for us, it was really flipping that whole model upside down and saying, these are the resources we have available to us. How do we get everybody working together to design a system that is more seamless for students?
This system would not work without teacher collaboration.
Every decision we make, we have to make as a team.
We can problem solve together and look at data together and make decisions about what kids need.
If we're going to work collectively to ensure the success of every child, then we had to get on the same page about what we were teaching. So for us, it was an early lesson in identifying a core curriculum in math and reading that was the same no matter who the teacher was.
Now to get us started.
So every single student will receive universal instruction, core instruction, also known as Tier 1.
Efficient and helpful.
Some kids will need supplemental instruction. They'll need a little bit more than core. So you'll hear that referred to as Tier 2. And then some kids may need more intensive intervention, and so you'll hear that referred to as Tier 3.
So what did it tell you to do? How are you going to figure it out?
Probably go.
Teachers at the very beginning of the block are teaching core instruction to their core 22 students. And then they would move into a time that we call autonomous time, where the students will be more self-directed in their learning.
Colombian order. The break.
So some teachers may pull Tier 2 at that time. You also may see Tier 3 being pulled at that time in a very small room where kids can really focus.
So this book is about the Constitution. And the reason
it's pretty awesome here. My three favorite things are math, writing, and reading.
It's kind of cool, so you don't just with one teacher and you get to kind of move rooms and move teachers.
When you go down with Mr. Kirby and your small group, then it really stretches your brain in a really good way.
Okay. Go for it.
So teachers organize themselves in a variety of different ways, and it depends on teacher strengths and student needs.
Brushing away the old vine.
We may need a specific group just on predicting, and you don't have 5 kids who need predicting and you're 22. You have a whole bunch of them across the learning community. So it's really important that the tiers are connected. Your core instruction could be inferring. If they're receiving Tier 1 with me and Tier 2 with you and Tier 3 with someone else, we all are really teaching inferring. We just may be teaching it with different materials.
So you gotta make sure you read the answer.
That requires a lot of trust amongst teachers. And that also requires teachers to communicate. They meet every Wednesday in a learning community, and they definitely check in with each other about instruction.
They have almost all of their packet already filled out, and then there's some groups of kids that don't have anything filled out.
We have the same problems with when they come to us, they have to finish up the packet. So if we try to stick to what that core part is, and then
we meet as a student success team. That team is made up of myself, the learning community leader, all of the core teachers, administrators, guidance counselors, speech and language pathologists.
All of those stakeholders will sit around the table together, take a look at all the data, have deep conversations about the effectiveness of the core instruction, and also monitor the progress of the Tier 2 groups and the Tier 3, and then problem solve together to figure out the ways in which they might make adjustments. And then once they make those major adjustments, then they'll come back together once a month to make sure progress is being made.
3% of the time. And then reading, which was mini lesson, 45% of the time, and then 83% of the time. And then you also had some really other good details.
Maybe her goal sheet is almost like twice as long, so she has more space like on Monday. And right before you go into Tier 2, okay, like what are the specific things you're gonna do?
I think that we're meeting the students' needs better.
The growth that we see in our students is phenomenal. We've had kids go from 8th percentile to 30th, 40th percentile, and sometimes higher.
My work is to make sure that all kids get what they need. We have lots of different types of learners, and everybody deserves to have instruction that meets their needs.
That was beautiful.
Okay, so what you just saw is an example of an academic MTSS. So what were some of the core features that you saw in there that you think could relate perhaps to a behavioral MTSS? Positive reinforcement, What else? Meeting individual needs, absolutely. Teaming, did you all see the teaming, right? They meet regularly as a team. Do we see a tiered continuum of supports? So we saw they were talking about Tier 1 supports, Tier 2 supports, Tier 3 supports, and coordinating all of that across the grades and across the students. What else did we see? Okay, so engaging the students, really keeping them focused on their task, great. Student voice, is that what you said? Student voice, great one. How about data? Did we see data? Right, so they were collecting data, but not only were they collecting data, what were they doing with those data? Using it to set goals. And what else? And make decisions. Progress monitoring, right? So not only are they collecting data to see what the student is doing, they're actually working to see, are they making progress, right? Are we meeting our goals? We set our goals, but are we achieving those goals? Okay, so I'm gonna show you now an MTSS for behavior. I do apologize, these are elementary examples. I pulled these because I thought that they were more interesting and they gave a little bit more clearly defined MTSS core features, but there are secondary examples. So if you like these videos, if you are coming from a secondary site, we'll post these on our website as well. And then after this, I'm gonna share with you where you can find the slides that we'll be presenting today too.
If students aren't comfortable with who they are or with their behaviors in school, if they're not succeeding in those kinds of ways, then they're not going to succeed academically.
If the child is not behaving, there's a need not being met. Okay. My biggest goal is to make sure they're getting what they need.
You ever have to make a decision? Do you know what a decision is?
The approach for social emotional learning within the tier system mirrors our approach to learning in the academic system.
Just like for reading and just like for math, you need a solid core for behavior, for expectation, common language.
That's right, the difference between conflict and bullying. Anybody remember what the differences are?
The core instruction for social emotional in elementary, a big part of that is during morning meetings every day. That's the way that the school day starts.
You greet each other, you get to share what's happening in your life.
Share today. Put your thumb on your knee when you know what you want to share.
Our core instruction is second step, And that's a program that ranges from lessons about friendship to conflict resolution. And typically that happens once a week during morning meeting, or that could happen during their whole learning community meeting on Wednesday mornings.
Is bullying something that happened one time, or is it repeated?
Repeated.
Is there even power or uneven power?
Uneven.
Then, just like academic tiered instruction, some students need a little bit more. Typically that tier 2 instruction comes from a guidance counselor, usually within a group setting.
I group them by need, not necessarily by grade. We have friendship groups. Some students, they don't know how to initiate a friendship. I have a grief group of children who have lost a loved one. I have a group for self-regulation. So they're giving strategies on what to do with their emotions when their emotions become very strong.
Okay. Do you ever have to make a really hard decision because you're so angry you don't know what to do?
Yeah.
Yeah? I'm going to teach you today something that is going to help you relax. Okay, here we go. Gently close your eyes and take deep breaths.
So the strategy was to give them a sense of calmness, go to their happy place, use that self-talk.
Go on the cloud in your mind and feel how soft and comfortable it is.
I find that sometimes pulling them out is not necessarily the answer. Pushing in is something that I started doing more so in the last 3 years. I wanted to transfer some of the skills that we learned in my office to my classroom.
Last one. And your turn.
If you can get them to do that enough times, they're going to feel that success in the classroom. They're going to feel successful learning.
It is on you.
Good job, guys. You're working hard.
Some students need more intensive support, and so then they would usually meet with a guidance counselor in tier 3, more one-on-one.
For instance, a child is bullying other children. That child wouldn't be in tier 2. Most children that are doing bullying have very specific needs, so you would have that child meet with me individually. I usually work really closely with school psych. The trajectory or the need may be an evaluation, then they're more likely to get involved with that child.
Will you let me know right away so that way I can pull him in, because he did really well when we put him on that behavior plan last year.
Our student success team meets every 4.5 weeks, and we talk through what types of supports the kids need.
There are many people around the table. The classroom teachers are there, the learning community leader, school counseling is there, somebody from school psychology is there, an administrator is there.
Decisions are made of all of us as a group. So it's not like the teacher says, okay, I want them in tier 2, put them in there.
It happens every time. Helping him see the pattern of the people that he sits with and the pattern of arguments and frustration that he has, because I think it's frustrating for him too. I honestly don't think that he really recognizes that pattern.
Is he, and I know that at one point Peter was refusing to take his medication.
Based on his behavior, he is.
I would say he seems like he is.
Because there was definitely.
So I just put in that Ritzy's going to continue to work with Peter on these issues, but also working with Mom.
Quantifying their progress is what sets up a challenge. Because how do you quantify self-esteem? I usually do some form of evaluation that I know that the child is understanding the message or the skill that they're trying to practice. Usually there's observations, pre and post. Teacher input gives me data, parent input. I use rating scales that give me information, but not necessarily scientifically coded information. We go back, and every 9 weeks at the SSTs, I ask, do they still need my services? So if this child has made enough progress, we remove them. I may do a check-in, I may do a follow-up, but it all depends on the need of every specific student.
What friends to play with?
I want to make sure that every child that walks through those doors is treated in a way that's with respect and love and kindness, and I want to treat every child like I would want my own to be treated.
What were some core features that you observed in there? Talk to me about MTSS. What did you see in there? Small groups. So where would that be within an MTSS hierarchy? Tier 2. Great. So we saw some tier 2 small groups. What else did we see? Focused interventions, right? So for individuals. Right? Yeah, you're getting some claps for that one, right? So when we see challenging behaviors, this is a call for us to do what? To support, to teach, right? This is our opportunity, especially as social workers, right? You guys have such an amazing skill set to get in there and to teach. And a lot of what we see in traditional, school discipline practices is behavior is what? It's a reason to punish, right? And so we're really working to kind of flip this around. It's really a call to teach. Great. What else did you observe from an MTSS lens? Yes, all students receive Tier 1 services, right? They were talking about core behavior curriculum. Just like in academics, how they have the core standards, we also want to make sure that we have core curriculum for behavior. And what were some of those core curriculum examples that you saw? Second step, right? So a really nice social emotional learning evidence-based program, and you saw some of that in the group time that they had in the classroom, coming in, welcoming each other, greeting each other, talking about how they were feeling that day. That's some of that universal support when we think about behavior supports. What else did you see from an MTSS perspective? Great. Okay, so the comment was that we're seeing you're working on second step and you're doing some pull out of certain students.
Well, I'm doing the whole class in the afternoon.
The whole class in the afternoon. Okay, so just one class at a time, right? So how cool would it be if we could take that skill set and transfer it to all of the teachers and empower the teachers to be able to embed those practices into their classroom as part of universal supports for behavior for all students in the school? Awesome example, thank you. What else did you see? How about teaming? Did anyone notice the teams? Yep. Awesome, right? They're working together collaboratively. And I will say, you may not always have a team like this, right? It may be at your school site that not everyone is on that same page, but at least they're all coming to the table and you can work together, as opposed to having someone down the hall that's shouting, get that kid out of this school, right? Everyone's coming together to help support that student or to help support that group of students, or looking at all students as a whole across the campus. How about data? Anyone notice anything about the data collection, progress monitoring? Perfect. Okay, so there were two things that you noticed. So I'm going to just repeat that so I can make sure everyone can hear. So what we saw is we saw some quantification of the data, right? They were talking on here about how do we quantify self-esteem. They're working on self-esteem in that small group setting, and that is a tough thing to quantify, right? But how can we be sure that we know when the student has made enough progress that they no longer need our services? And that's a question that we need to ask, and it may be a challenging question to quantify something like that, but what they were saying is they were getting input from the parents, from the student, from the teacher, from the team as to whether or not those services were still needed. That takes practice, and we're going to work on that actually today. The other thing that we saw is generalization to the classroom. So instead of, you as social workers have the opportunity to work sometimes one-on-one with students or in small groups, but now you've done this really amazing work with this group of students. How do we then generalize it? How do we push that skill set back into the classroom? How do we make sure that the students are using those skills, not just in your small group, but now also out in the real world where they really need to use those skills? So using the data to make sure that we are doing that as well. Awesome. Any other observations? I think you all did a really good job on that one. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine. So again, all of the materials are available on our website. This is being video recorded, so you're not going to miss anything. So feel free to take notes if you'd like, but we really hope that you'll just kind of enjoy and participate today. Don't worry about writing everything down because it's all available for you anytime you want it, okay? All right, so this, again, I'm just going to tell you, this morning session is going to be like we're going to kind of chat a lot for the video. The afternoon is where we're going to get really interactive, okay? So let's start with the definition of MTSS, okay? So MTSS, the most important thing to remember is MTSS is a framework. Okay? It's not a practice, it's not a program. It is a framework for including all of the different practices and programs together. That's really what we're aiming for here. It is the integration of a number of multiple tiered systems into one coherent, combined system that is meant to address multiple domains within education. So when we're talking about MTSS, we're talking about all of the different practices. There is nothing that should exist outside of the MTSS framework if we are really doing integrated MTSS. So where did MTSS come from? I'll give you a little bit of history. So MTSS really came from the public health care model. Okay, so what we see down here is sort of universal, available to all, individuals regardless of their health condition, okay? So if we think about the flu virus, right? Let's think about flu virus and prevention of flu virus. So at tier 1, we're talking about prevention, and we're talking about available to everyone. So a universal prevention for flu virus is hand washing, right? We are all taught from a young age to wash our hands when we go to the bathroom, after we shake hands with people, if we play with a lot of toys, if we're around a lot of individuals who are sick. It's prevention strategy. Everyone has access to washing hands. Okay? Then as we go up that hierarchy, we get into tier 2. So these are the more selected or targeted groups of individuals. So these are the people that are at risk for perhaps contracting the virus or the flu, right? And so for those individuals that are at higher risk, what do? Vaccinate, right? We do a flu shot. Perfect. So that is a perfect tier 2 intervention. Not everyone receives a flu vaccination every year, but a targeted group of people. So these are typically pregnant women, elderly, babies, right? People that are more susceptible to contracting the flu virus. And then when we talk about tier 3, so this is individual supports. These are individuals who have already displayed the illness, contracted the illness. Okay, so these are people with the flu. Tier 3, you have the flu. And at tier 3, what do we do for the flu? Well, we've got Tamiflu, we have rest, water, hydration. Some people are hospitalized for IV fluids, medication, okay? So that is how the public healthcare model works. That is where MTSS came from. Now, when we take that and we cross it over to the bridge of education, what does this look like, right? So now here we are with MTSS in education. So universal, all students have access to it. Okay, so this is interventions that are available to all students that optimize learning and optimize social and emotional behaviors. Okay, so again, school-wide interventions. So when we think about academics, we think about core curriculum. When we think about behavior, we're thinking about social and emotional skills. When we get to tier 2, these are our targeted individuals, or our select group of individuals who have additional needs. They are high risk for really challenging behavior issues. Okay, so these might be students, we don't know yet, and we're going to share how to make that assessment later. But these might be individuals that come from significant trauma backgrounds, from perhaps unstable households. They may not have housing available to them. They may have some diagnoses that might make them more at risk for other behaviors. So those are going to be our targeted group of individuals, and typically what we do is we work in small group settings with those individuals. As we go up the hierarchy, now we're looking at tier 3. This is our individualized support. So these are students that are already engaging in very challenging behaviors. Okay? So what we do up here is we do a lot of assessment work and a lot of individualized intervention. Okay, the history of MTSS. So again, coming from public health, in about 1994, there was really a big shift towards MTSS in education. And just in 2009, this really started to explode in the literature. So we are not talking about something that's been implemented in schools for 50 years, right? MTSS is very new. So you all are on the cutting edge of MTSS, and I will share with you that MTSS is even new in the state of Nevada. So really, you all are getting sort of like the latest, greatest, newest information, and MTSS is sweeping the country. If you have not heard of it yet, you will absolutely hear of it now, because you'll be more aware of it, and you'll hear it. You'll hear it in the news. It's in all kinds of legislation, funding opportunities. So MTSS is very big lately. MTSS came from the integration of RTI, which is response to intervention, academic interventions, and PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports. So the combination of RTI and PBIS led to what is called an integrated MTSS. And really what lately the trend is bringing in any practices into that framework. So using that framework that was learned from RTI and PBIS and bringing in all of the different practices, trauma-informed care, restorative practices, mental health supports, social emotional learning, bringing it all in, embedding it, and using an MTSS framework. And we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about the core features of MTSS and how do we look at everything that we do from that MTSS perspective. Okay, so this is just a nice little diagram so you can quickly see kind of how the RTI and how the PBIS came together and where those core features overlap. Yes, ma'am. Yes. RTI is response to intervention. This is the academic multi-tiered system of support. And PBIS is positive behavior interventions and supports. That is the behavior MTSS, and we're going to talk about the combination of those today. Okay, so here you can see this nice little Venn diagram. And in the middle, this is really where I want you to focus, is in the middle. Where is that overlap? Where is the overlap between the behavior side and the academic side? And so what you can see here is that we have scientifically based interventions. So these are evidence-based practices from science, right? When we are working with students, we really don't have a lot of time with them. If you think of the grand scheme of their life, we have a very small amount of time to have a very big impact for some students. And we want to use practices that we know work well. They are already evidence-based. We know we will have an impact if we do X. Instruction as prevention. So that's what we were talking about earlier, right? So instead of behavior or academic, lack of academic progress as something that needs to be punished, this is an opportunity for us to teach, right? So we have this great slide that we love to talk about, and it says, if a child doesn't know how to tie their shoe, we teach them. If a child doesn't know how to do math, well, we teach them how to do math. If they don't know how to manage their money, we teach them. If they don't know how to behave, typically there has been a lot of punishment around that, exclusionary discipline around that. Really, we're trying to move towards that teaching. Just like we would teach any other skill set, we want to teach appropriate behaviors. Tiered continuum of supports. Well, this is going to be drilled into your brain 900 times today, right? You're going to see 900 triangles, but that's what we're talking about, is that tiered continuum of supports. And what are the decisions that we need to make to move someone to tier 2? How do we know when they need to move to tier 3? And how do we know when they've been successful within our interventions? Regular screening for early intervention. So we're going to talk to you today about universal screening and what does that mean. And we'll talk about the difference between assessments, which happen usually at the individual level when we've got a significant issue going on, and what is a screening? What does a screening look like? Use of a problem-solving model and data decision rules, right? So again, we're going to talk a lot about data and problem solving today, and really trying to quantify the work that we do, and how do we quantify it, and then how can we make decisions as to when someone is ready to move on. Focus on teaming. So you saw that in the video really nicely represented, right? In an MTSS framework, we as the therapist, we as the behavior therapist, we as the social worker, we as the counselor, don't make decisions for our students or our clients on our own. In an MTSS model, we work within that team setting. Emphasis on improving quality of implementation, right? So we always want to make sure that we have really good practices in place, and then embedding it into the school's improvement plan. So really, again, MTSS is the whole school moving in one direction. And that takes time. Systems change takes a lot of time. So again, here you go, is that MTSS, the integration of academic and behavior. And the reason that we want to integrate these practices is because we're going to conserve resources in the long run. It takes some time and investment up at front to really get everyone on the same page, to get the team together, to use our data, to make sure that we've got our practices in place. But in the long run, we're going to have the best outcomes for students and the best outcomes for staff too. We want to prevent initiative fatigue. So I'm going to show you a little example of the birth and death cycle of educational initiatives. But a lot of times what we see in schools is that we kind of get this like new, sexy, new, cool, the latest, greatest initiative, and they come on and then they die, right, really fast. So we want to prevent that. We want to make sure that we are connecting all of our efforts, right? So we don't want to work in isolation, because if we work in isolation, we lose out on the opportunity to impact maybe the academic side as well, right? Behavior impacts the academic success, as well as academic success can impact a student's behavior. Integrating into one framework, we want to make sure that we're improving those educational outcomes for students, so that way we can really maximize the impact of our work in the students' outcomes. And then making sure that this is sustainable. So again, if we invest now, this will sort of be a long-term sustainability thing. So here's that birth and death cycle of educational initiatives that I was talking to you about. And this is published, this comes out of the literature. So you can see that every about 4 years, we bring on a new initiative, and within that 4-year cycle, that initiative goes away. This is very typical of education. I don't know how long you all have worked in schools, but if you work in schools for 16, 20 years, you will see things come and things will go, and things will come and things will go. And we really want to prevent that, right? So think about what's happening right now in your school sites. Maybe you have some really great second step programming, social emotional learning. Maybe you have some really good trauma-informed care practices. Maybe you have, maybe you're working on positive behavior interventions and supports. Maybe, whatever it is that you're working on, could you imagine investing all of this time, all of this effort? Think about the amount of time that you have put into some of the practices and programs that you're working on just to see them die a couple years down the road, right? That's what we want to prevent. That's what MTSS is going to help us do. Okay, the good news, while this sounds overwhelming, the good news is that MTSS has already begun in the state of Nevada. So this is a little bit of data just coming out of the PBIS Technical Assistance Center. And so what you can see here is that 24% of schools across the state are already using a behavioral MTSS. They're using PBIS. And the nice thing is, how many of you are at a PBIS school? Just a quick show of hands. Perfect. So if you are at a PBIS school site, you can embed anything that you're doing into that framework. So if you take any practice and you embed it into PBIS, that integration, that's where we're moving towards. We want to see that integrated MTSS, so that includes academics. Anything that you're working on, you should be using that MTSS lens. Okay, so what is the role of the social worker in MTSS? And this is something that I need you guys to share with me too. So I will share with you some ideas that I have, but I want to hear from you all too. So I'm going to have Catherine will run the mic for me, if that's okay. So I really want this to be an interactive discussion because I want to hear from the ground perspective, how are you embedding your work into MTSS? So let's take a quick look here. This is from Amber. Amber joined us this morning. You all, I think, probably know Amber Reed. Thank you for being here, Amber. So this is from SWA, right? So I pulled some information. Amber sent me all kinds of really great information from SWA. And what I want to orient you to is that SWA is very big in support of MTSS. So social workers using MTSS and working within an MTSS framework. Very cool. So this is out of the SWA document. So they talk about how do we implement a multi-tiered system of support. And so what they talk about here is they say, again, coming from RTI and from PBIS, the best components for MTSS, the most effective components, require adequate access to school-employed specialized instruction support personnel. Right? Hey, we've got a leg up here. We've got amazing support personnel out in our schools. Integration of services, including mental health, behavior, academics, school and community-based services. So that is really key to MTSS. So again, anything that is happening in your school should be MTSS. It's not just behavior, it's not just mental health, it's not just social work that happens in an MTSS framework. It's everything. Now, is it your role to go out and to tell your school, hey, school, we have to take everything that we're doing and put it in an MTSS framework? No, but you all are the catalysts for that change, which is really, really amazing opportunity. Adequate staff time for planning and problem solving. Again, that's that teaming piece, right? Getting together, spending time using data and problem solving for students individually and students as a whole across the campus. Effective collection, evaluation, interpretation, and use of data. You're going to see this over and over and over and over today. A lot of emphasis on data collection and progress monitoring. Patience, commitment, and strong leadership. It does take time, and it takes collaboration. So like we saw in the video, one of your colleagues had made the comment that, wow, it was so nice that everyone was on the same page. It does take time to get everyone on the same page, but that investment in time is worthwhile in the long run because you saw how functional that team was, right? Can you imagine if your student was at that school, how effective those practices would be and how supported that student would be if they're meeting regularly to make sure to review the data, to review the progress monitoring, not just in an intervention that you're working on, but they're talking about it from a behavioral perspective, from a mental health perspective, from an academic perspective. And it would be amazing to have more community involvement at that table too. Okay, so this is where I need your help. Oh, no cheating. Okay, so MTSS right? I've already seen that there is a lot of love between MTSS and social work, and SWA's putting that out there. So what do you think is the role of the social worker within MTSS? What can you do? And I'm going to have Catherine run. She's going to get her exercise on today. She's very fast, so you can be fast.
We provide the tier 2 sports, the groups, and the individualized, the tier 3.
Absolutely, right? So group supports, individualized. What else? What else does a social worker do? Oh, come on. Don't be shy.
Hi, I wanted to just say that not everyone who's a safe school professional is a social worker.
Okay.
And some
Great,
of us
thank
are
you.
like marriage and family therapists, which is what I am.
Perfect.
And I only say that because I think that there are not only differences in licensures right now anyway, but there's also differences in how the schools implement and use the staff, the safe school professional or other staff. I've seen schools where they're very integrated, they're included in all the meetings, and then other places where we're very much separate from that still. And I think that that is a goal that has to kind of come from the top down to make sure that we're more integrated in with what everyone else is doing with the students.
Excellent comment. I really appreciate you making that comment. We actually, I appreciate that now because it's something that is important to bring up now. Later today, when we will get into some case scenarios of exactly what you're talking about. So what do we do perhaps when you're not invited to the table in the way that you would like to be invited? Thank you for that. My apologies for calling you all social workers. I will try to use safe schools professionals. I think I just, the fluency of making this PowerPoint specific to social workers has me using that language, but thank you for that. And that's very true, right? So what I want you to think about today is maybe not exactly what you're doing right now, but what could MTSS, if it were at your school, open up for you? How could you be involved in MTSS? So thinking about bigger, broader, because we are spending a lot of time at the state working on how do we bring MTSS to the districts and how can the districts support their schools in MTSS. So you are part of that conversation. Again, this is something that is new, right? So even in the literature, we didn't see this come out until about 8 years ago. In the state of Nevada, this is just coming out within the last couple of years. And so you may not be, you're right, you may not be at a school site right now that is implementing and embedded and invested in MTSS, but our hope is that within the next 5-10 years, the schools are using and implementing MTSS. So what could the role of the Safe Schools professional be if you were at a site with MTSS? What could you do?
So I know that in my school in Carson City and then a few of our other schools, we are part of Tier 1 where we participate in social campaigns and promotion of safe and respectable learning environment, those sort of things. So
perfect, thank you.
We're also liaisons. Sometimes the support comes from not just the school itself, but the family or another resource.
Excellent.
One of the reasons I think that social workers aren't often, or safe schools professionals aren't often brought to the table is because there is a misconception of what their role is at the school. And so for us, attending a staff meeting or two and being put on that agenda to explain what our role is often gets us an invitation.
Okay, great. So finding your way to that team, that's a great one.
I think, too, it's important to acknowledge that we need to begin having dialogues with counselors, and we all need to be at the same table. And I think there's some bridging that needs to happen between counselors and safe school professionals, because we want to be one large team, and it gets sort of complex, I think.
A lot of role crossover.
Yeah, and people don't know what they're doing, kind of. So I think to have a dialogue with counselors, to have everybody come to the table, invite everybody to the same trainings, and so we can all be exchanging information, because they have a lot of information that I can utilize and vice versa.
Yes, so collaborating with other personnel. Yeah, absolutely.
I think one role that I would like to see
school social workers here in Nevada is to be a support for schools so that they're able to run a smoother MTSS process. So in other states where I came from, social workers oftentimes took on that role, and we have unique skills to be able to get a multidisciplinary team together to hear those different perspectives and make sure that we're connecting to the family. So I see as at the social worker as someone who can really bring people together.
Perfect. So sort of a team lead, a minimum a team member. Excellent. Any other thoughts on how a social worker or how a Safe Schools professional could be involved in MTSS?
I know as...
oh, you need a microphone.
I know as... Hello. I know as interns, the three of us up here in the front, we can act as an extra set of eyes. Students sometimes slip through the cracks, and you can't be everywhere all the time, the safe school professionals. And so I feel as we can act as a extra set of eyes so that students don't slip through the cracks.
Perfect. So doing observations in the classroom, perhaps, using data, identifying needs. Excellent. Thank you.
So for me, this is my third year in a school district. In the first 2 years, a lot of like building rapport, meeting the community, meeting the kids, seeing the need. And now I'm like at that point where, okay, I need to implement. I need to be showing growth or an increase or a reason why this needs to be here.
Great.
So I'm kind of a little stuck, like, okay, now how do I do it?
Okay, great. So getting to the place where you're ready to implement practices and embed those practices within the school culture.
So as a safe school professional, how I found my niche in my school is when I go to MTSS meetings, I listen to the students that are already getting services, and some of them have been getting it for a long time and have a lot of minutes, and they're not progressing. And so that's when I come in as a safe school professional. I have the ability to have this one-on-one and be able to sort of evaluate what's going on and talk to the child and go in deeper to find out what exactly is going on. And sometimes it's family issues, and sometimes I find that there's a learning disability that needs to be addressed. And so my rapport with the psychologist and the school social worker is very unique. I'm lucky. They've kind of just wanted me, and they had an idea what they wanted in a safe school professional, and I kind of just fit that in. But that's what I do when I go to the MTSS meetings. And so that's been really, really helpful for me.
Thank you. So working one-on-one with a student and bringing that information back to a team. Very nice.
I think something that we could do a lot of if we have the opportunity or given the opportunity is education. You're providing a lot of education to those students around the social, emotional, and behavioral, and most of us have that training, and that would be something that we could offer to provide for the schools is some of the social emotional learning that maybe the school counselors or teachers don't have time for.
Perfect. Yes. Excellent.
One of the things I appreciate that we have is flexibility and versatility, that we can respond to things as they happen. Every school year is different, it has its own culture, and some of the needs might change from year to year.
Great. Thank you.
I love all this feedback.
This is fantastic. I knew that we would hear it from you better than you would hear it from me, because I do not work in this school like you do. So it's really nice to hear it from your perspective. How else can a social worker or safe schools professional be involved in MTSS? Any other thoughts? Catherine's getting her exercise today.
I like it.
She loves it.
This right here?
In addition to the flexibility to respond to a situation, we have the flexibility to enter the community and let parents know what we're doing and kind of destigmatize the social worker involvement, that sometimes the concept of what a social worker in a school would do. And then we can bring the community and the parents back into these tiered responses.
Great. Thank you, right? Involving the family, getting the community involved.
Amber.
Wow, that's loud. I was just going to say, so regardless of what your title or your license is, whether your school refers to you as a social worker or a safe school professional, your practice model is school social work. And so
if you go outside of your district or outside of the state, no one else in the world uses the term safe school professional. We made that up, okay? Because not all of you are social workers, and we want to honor the strength and the that comes from a diversity of a diverse professional pool. That we honor the strength that comes from our other colleagues across the specialized instructional support personnel continuum. But thinking about that, in the model of school social work, fundamentally, we revert back to those core values of social work, right? And we think about those practices, about starting where our clients are at and honoring clients' right to self-determination, the importance of relationships, all of those things. When you're looking to find your niche, when you're looking to support your MTSS team, never forget those core values and ethics and the practice model that we bring into that. And that will allow you to, remember, we advocate. Someday I'm going to do the social work ABCs, but we educate, we advocate, we intervene, all of the things that we do in our practices, we can do those within an MTSS framework and within our school as part of the MTSS team.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I think going along with just what Amber was saying is that we have to build this up in the schools so they can do it when we're not there, especially when we're spread across multiple schools. We're not always in there right at that moment. They need to be able to still follow through.
I'll just add one more thing. You're all in completely different places too, right? So if your school, and this is normal, right? Welcome to education. And and it can change year to year, it can change mid-year, it can change as soon as you change a building. But all of your districts are in different places, and again, starting where they're at. In some places, they have established MTSS teams. And so it would not be very social worky to come in and say, I'm here to fix your team. You guys are kind of messing stuff up here, so, right? We wouldn't do that. We would come in and we'd say, I'm here to help. What can I do? Give me a job. You need me to pick up trash? I'll pick up trash, right? After parent night or whatever. And so go in. Your counselor should be your go-to if you have a counselor because they've been here and they've been doing that. And so they should become your best friend and your biggest partner in your building. So honor the work that's been done. And then if you're in a place where there hasn't been work done, then you get to pioneer, right?
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna do a little activity. So I need a practice. What we're going to do is I'm going to put something up on the screen, and if you can see yourself doing that at your school, I want you to give me some kind of cool shout, like a woohoo, okay? So let's practice. Yes, I would like a model, actually. So Jody is going to practice the woohoo. So I'm going to put something up on the screen, and Jody is going to say, yep, just like that, okay? Now, shall we all practice together? Ready, set, something up on the screen. Woohoo! Okay, perfect. Okay, so we definitely see that we could be a team leader or a team member, right? So I just want to make sure that wasn't a practice. Let's do this for real now. Okay, ready? Here we go. Team leader or team member? Woohoo! Okay. Collect and aggregate data. Oh yeah. Feel free to be loud. This is like the get loud and impress the guests at the casino of what we're doing in here. Track progress towards goals. Woohoo. Conduct group interventions. I should hear a lot more woohoos on this one. This is like perfect spot for you all. Home observations. Home visits. Oh, okay, that's okay. Not a lot of, Amber wants some woohoos. Connect a family or student to community resources. Okay. You're too high. I'm too high? Oh, Jody. Involve a family member in an intervention. Right? Getting the family involved. Write behavior plans. Woohoo. Consult with school personnel on an intervention or a practice. Good. Teach and rehearse social skills. I need like a little bit more enthusiasm. Maybe I'm boring, maybe it's too early in the morning. Work one-on-one with students.
I think it's the woohoo.
What, we need a different one. Okay, give me a different one. Yeah. Let's ditch the woohoo. Let's go with a yeah. Ready? Works for you. Okay. Oh, or you can do what works for you. Totally individualized, totally fine. Conduct or assist with assessments. Yeah. Oh, who did a drum roll? I love it. Thank you. Whoever did that, major props. Collaborate with school personnel on an intervention or practice. Yeah. Document data during interventions.
There we go.
Consult with a family. Set measurable goals. Yes. Assess environmental changes in the classroom. And how does that impact academics? How does that impact behavior? Conduct screeners. Promote consistency across environments and people. All right. Very nice. So this is not a trick, right? This is actually something that you all can all engage in. This is part of your role within MTSS. You may not be doing it now, and that's okay, right? Like we were saying, every school is at a different place. Some schools have an MTSS hierarchy already going, which makes it easier to embed yourself. Some schools may not. But these are all things that these are a very good role for a safe schools professional. Now, let's talk about what does that look like from a tiered perspective. So I want to talk about this from tier 1, 2, and 3. We're going to first start with that tier 1. So tier 1 being universal interventions or practices. Okay, so these support all students within the school, all students. And my friend Casey has a really great example of this. So it means that if I have a Snickers bar, every student in that school would need to consume the Snickers bar in order for it to be a tier 1 practice. Okay, so everyone eats the Snickers bar. So when we're talking about tier 1, these are practices that are really intended for that school climate to keep that environment safe, consistent, and predictable. So what is the role of the social worker within tier 1? Let's get a little bit of popcorn going on again. And I'll give you a hint, is that you just saw all of the little items, and we're going to push them over into these slides. So you've already seen everything. So what is tier 1? What do you think a social worker can do at tier 1?
Be a part of the school safety team.
Part of the team. Perfect.
Family engagement. Influence the school culture. You're right, Amber. This is data. Collect data. Report on data.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's get some of these up here, right? So here are some really great roles for the social worker at tier 1. So we heard being a team leader, a team member. We heard collect and aggregate data, tracking progress towards goals, okay, also data related, right? Teaching and rehearsing social skills. So we had talked about some sort of universal social emotional practices, great role for the Safe Schools professionals. Conducting screeners, so this is at the universal level. We'll talk about universal screening in a little while. Promoting consistency across environments and people. So making sure that if we have universal practices in place, that not only a couple of us are doing those universal practices, that everyone is doing those universal practices, right? So we heard a great example here with Second Step. Second Step is a really great universal intervention, but if only a couple of people are doing it or only a couple of classrooms are doing it, that's not really a universal school-wide intervention. So how do we move that to be a universal school-wide intervention? That's a good thing to start thinking about. Consulting with school personnel on an intervention or practice, right? So if you are the expert of the social emotional skill set in your school building, how can you work with the teachers to help embed those practices into their classrooms? Okay, let's look at tier 2. So again, tier 2, meaning sort of the targeted or selected groups of individuals that are at risk for more challenging behaviors. So when we get to tier 2, we see a slight increase in the frequency and the intensity of the intervention, right? So we're spending more time with the students who are enrolled in tier 2 practices than we are necessarily reaching those students that are a universal level. And the interventions are typically conducted in a group setting. So this is not individualized yet. This is in a group. Or it doesn't need to be like in a group in your office, but it could be a group of students are enrolled in a certain practice or intervention, okay? All right, so what can the social worker or Safe Schools professional do at tier 2? You can shout it out, I can repeat it, that will be fine. Small groups, perfect, what else? Classroom support, right? So if we're working with a specific classroom, that would be a tier 2 intervention because we're working with just one classroom. Clubs, running clubs, right? Again, so that's kind of like that small group. Social emotional skills, yep, absolutely. Connecting families to those community resources, awesome. Check in, check out, right? So that's a great small group intervention, perfect. In-school suspension, tell me more about that. Attendance, okay. Working on attendance, maybe if a group of students has some truancy issues. Great. Attendance teams, that's a new one. I've never heard of that. Very cool. Okay, let's take a look. So, conducting or assisting with assessments, right? So when we get to that tier 2 level, this is where we start to perhaps do some assessments, okay? Screeners, we talk about screeners from the universal perspective. When we talk about assessments, that is more geared towards a group of students or an individual student. So here's where we start to get into the assessment world. Team leader, we definitely heard this one, team member. Documenting data during interventions. So if we are working in groups, are we collecting data and how are we doing that? Promoting consistency across environments and people, we definitely heard that one. Consult with school personnel on an intervention or practice, so kind of share our wealth, share our knowledge with other school personnel. Collect and aggregate data, collaborate with school personnel, conduct group interventions, we heard a lot of that, that's awesome. Tracking progress towards goals, setting measurable goals, and teaching and rehearsing social skills. So you guys did a really good job on tier 2, we definitely kind of nailed that one. Let's take a look at tier 3. So again, tier 3 being individualized supports. This is sort of that one-on-one intervention that you might do for an individual that has chronic behavior challenges, okay? The strategies are individualized, again, increasing in the frequency and intensity. So for those students that you're working with at the tier 3 level, you will likely see them more often, and the intervention will be more intensive than those students at tier 2. And then typically when we talk about tier 3, not always, but typically, we are also bringing in some community partners. And community partners could be from a wraparound type model. It could be another mental health professional in the community. It might be speech language OT services, the family, right? So this is what we talk about when we're talking about tier 3. So role of the social worker at tier 3, give me some thoughts. Member of a PTR team. So PTR is? Prevent, teach, reinforce. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just assumed not everyone would know. I totally put you on the spot, sorry. Prevent, teach, reinforce. So that's kind of that behavioral process that we go through when a student has chronic behavior issues at tier 3. Thank you. Home visits, absolutely, right? So really connecting that family to the school and making sure that those skill sets that you're working on with the student in the classroom or in a small group or individually is also generalized into the home, making sure that they're safe at home. Yeah, I'm trying to give you like lots of snaps for that one. Great, yes. So working with the student in their natural environment, so important because so many times those students get pulled out and and teachers like that and the students like that and you like that because it's really nice, you get that one-on-one special time with them. However, we really want to make sure that we are taking that skill set and taking it into the environment where they really need it, right? They can do all of the great conflict resolution in your office, but does that mean that they can engage in conflict resolution on the playground? Can they do it in their home, on the streets? So those are things that we need to be thinking about. Thank you, that was a great comment. What else? Crisis support, very nice. So connecting that individual to community partners, bringing the community into the school, really nice referrals from mental health services. Yes, getting the parents involved at tier 3, absolutely. Any other thoughts? Tier 3? Okay, let's take a look. All right, oh, we got a lot, right? Okay, so I'm not gonna read all of them to you. I'm gonna let you all kind of read through them briefly. Now, any observations when we look across, I'm gonna click back real quick. So here's tier 1, 2, and 3. What do we see? What kind of a trend do we see here? Some things hit all 3 tiers. Awesome. What else do we see? More involved, right? So the role of the Safe Schools professional actually expands at tiers 2 and 3. So especially you think about the skill set that you're coming in with, right? Whether you're a social worker, an MFT, an intern, you have a specific skill set, therefore you will be more likely to be using that specific skill set. And those skills are really very valuable to the school at tiers 2 and 3. However, where can you have the biggest impact on the school culture and climate and all students? Tier 1, right? So even though your skill set really lends you well to tiers 2 and 3, you all really should be working at tier 1 because you can have a huge impact on a number of students at tier 1, whereas at tier 3, you can only touch a couple, right? So we're gonna talk more about that This, I think, is important for you all to see. So what I want you to take a look at is that across the bottom here, we've got teacher, grade level team, school leadership team, district team, intermediate leadership team, and then a state educational agency. So what I want you to see is sort of where are the efforts being focused. And when we talk about MTSS, we're talking about a system, right? So we have systems and we have practices. And we also have data. We'll talk about that in a little while. But really, for the purpose of this, I want you to think systems and practices. So at the level of the school, see where the teacher is? So the teacher really needs to focus on the practices, right? This is where we focus the most on the practices and the least on the systems work. The teacher is the one implementing the ground level practices, working with the students every day. Jody, could you, So the grade level team, right? So this is maybe like a group of teachers. They're, again, really big focus on practice, maybe a little bit heavier on the systems. And when I talk about systems, think about that team that you saw. Think about the progress monitoring that you saw. Those are the kind of things that we talk about in systems. When we get to that school leadership team, well, that's probably where you all are living, right? You're sort of at the school leadership level, okay? You have a big emphasis on practice, but you also have a considerable emphasis on the system. So a lot of the work that you do should be thinking about how can we make the systems that are operating at this school better. And something that I learned in doing putting together this presentation for you all is that one of the values of social work is systems thinking. And so it aligns really well with the work that you all are doing and the perspective that you're coming from. The district leadership team, kind of great big bubble on that one. The district leadership team, so that's like your district, right? The district that you work with in Carson City, Humboldt County, Washoe County. Those districts, they are focused, you'll see 50% on practices and 50% on systems. So that's really where we start to see a bigger shift, is that the district, we want them to really be doing that systems thinking, whereas we want them to be minimally or less so focused on practices. Okay, and as we go up, so when we're talking about like the state team, so myself, Jody, Amber, Ashley, we're really doing the big systems thinking. And the reason that the big systems work happens at the state level is so that we can support the districts, and the districts can support the schools, and the practices can be implemented for the students. So the practices happen at the level of the building, the systems happen at the level of administration. But you all are considered to be leadership within your buildings. Therefore, you do need to be thinking about systems.